Okay, let's talk about focus and concentration and how you can improve your focus and concentration using science-based protocols. Now, because today's episode is mainly focused on tools and not so much the underlying mechanisms, I'm mainly going to focus on what to do and when and how to do it. But I just want to take about 3 minutes and briefly describe a model that is a visual image that you can put in your mind that will help you incorporate the tools that I'll provide and that generally will help you understand at a mechanistic level how focus and concentration work. So what I want you to imagine is an arrow. And an arrow, of course, has an arrowhead and it has the shaft of that arrow. And in the context of the neuroscience of focus and concentration, the neurochemical system that really represents the shaft of that arrow, right, the straight line, is epinephrine, also called adrenaline. And today I'll refer to adrenaline and epinephrine interchangeably. It turns out that epinephrine/adrenaline are released within your brain from a little location, a little cluster of neurons called locus ceruleus, but you do not need to remember that name, and from your body from the adrenal glands. And the release of epinephrine from those two locations overall increases energy. It increases alertness. It does not alone increase focus. Okay, so the reason I've assigned epinephrine, adrenaline, as the shaft of the arrow is that if focus is the arrow, there is no focus without epinephrine. So things, whether or not they're behavioral or psychological or supplements or drugs that increase epinephrine, allow focus to occur. They are necessary for focus, but they are not sufficient for focus. That is, they are required, but they are not enough to create focus. So we're going to need epinephrine in the equation. Without epinephrine, there is no focus or concentration. Now, the arrowhead on this metaphorical arrowhead that represents focus and concentration is going to be represented or related to the mechanisms of acetylcholine, a different neurochemical that also exists in the brain and body. In fact, in the body, it's responsible for the contraction and movement of your muscles. But today we're talking about acetylcholine, not in that context, but rather in the context of its release within the brain. Acetylcholine is released from a couple of different locations in the brain, and the best way to think about it is it's like a spotlight. It highlights specific neurons, nerve cells that should be active, or more active, I should say, than the other neurons in the environment. So the reason I've assigned the arrowhead to acetylcholine and acetylcholine to the arrowhead is that if you have an arrow with a very big arrowhead that's really broad, really blunt, imagine a mile-wide arrowhead, that's not very focused on any one location. It's not really pointing to any one location, is it? But with a narrow, really tightly focused arrowhead, well, that's focused on one location. So we have alertness, epinephrine, and then we have the actual direction in which our concentration and focus is placed, and that's, at least in this mental model I'm creating, acetylcholine. And then in order to have ongoing focus, we need another neurochemical. And it turns out that that third neurochemical is dopamine, a molecule often associated with pleasure and reward, but it's really the molecule of motivation. So here I want you to imagine in your mind an arrow with an arrowhead, think acetylcholine in the arrowhead, a shaft or a line behind that arrowhead, which is epinephrine, also called adrenaline, and then behind it, a sort of an engine that keeps that focus moving forward, right? Because we don't just want to be focused for a moment, we want to be able to focus for 10 minutes or for an hour, or maybe even for 2 hours. Turns out there's an optimal duration to focus. I'll teach you that in just a little bit. But these three neurochemicals together, acetylcholine, epinephrine, and dopamine, really allow you to get focused, to focus very precisely, and in fact, increasingly precisely over time, to really narrow and narrow and narrow your focus progressively within a single bout of focus, and to continue to do that and to be able to do that repeatedly whenever you want.